Hello everyone, in today's tutorial video we are going to study about image whales and how it is helpful in actual analysis of the aquifer. So in this case we will be going to study about some of the positive as well as the negative boundary, and then at last we are going to study about the image whale and how it affects the analysis of the aquifer. So let's get started. So in this case, at first we have seen some of the equation that was given by Dupitz, and they means that was regarding the discharge or the kind of pumping that helps in just taking out water from the deep wells. So in that case, these were certain assumption which was quite significant, which states that the whatever the water was there that was being pumped out of an infinite areal extent. Okay, it was being said, but in reality if you just go through the geological formation, then you will find that certain there are certain folds which just restrict the movement of the water into such type of infinite areal extent. So if you just so you know that you will going to have so many kinds of folds and faults inside the surface of the earth, which just restrict the surface streams, and they just act as a hindrance, and hence we can just conclude that whatever the water that is found below the surface of the earth, that is not found in an infinite aerial extent, but it was being assumed. So that was one of the drawback. So in actual practice the continuity of the aquifer is usually broken, that I was telling you that it was broken due to the presence of such kinds of folds and faults. Okay, so what could be the other alternative? That is the uh, that was the limitation of the aquifer, that it needed to just go inside the surface of the earth to cover the all extent. But we know the geological system of the earth, that it consists of the crust, core, mantle. There is certain limitation up to which the water can go inside, so it can't be an infinite aerial extent. So if we are forming a certain equation of discharge or pumping of how much volume of water could be extracted from the wells, so there are certain limitations, but these limitations are always being looked out by the assumption which states like this of infinite aerial extent, and that is only because hindrances due to the presence of folds and faults. I think you are aware of what is the fold. If there is any earthquake, then there is formation of like this type of fold where one strata goes over the other and it forms a fold, or you can say there is breakdown in the um, crust below the surface of the, that can be a fault. So due to which one layer just goes below and above the other layer, so these are the fold which affects the whatever the water content that is present below the surface of the earth. Okay, so next thing is that about the positive and the negative boundaries. So what are these positive and the negative boundaries? So we know that when an aquifer is intersected by a perennial stream, perennial means in the stream in which water is present 24 into 7, okay, or some other water bodies with a sufficient flow, then it will prevent development of the cone of depression that is beyond that surface. So far we have seen that if we are just if this is the water level, and if we have just gone and drawn down the well over here, and then there we will going to see a cone of depression like this. But it states that, but this line states that if there is any perennial source of the, if there is any perennial source of the river, then such type of drawdown you will not, not notice. For example, in this case, if there is any perennial stream over here, so in this case if you are just going to draw down the well over here, then you are not going to see any kind of drawdown over here. That line is basically what is trying to say and that about the drawdown. So the intersection of the aquifer, just a second. Okay, now the intersection of the aquifer with the stream which will then become a geological boundary that is called positive boundary, the intersection between aquifer and the stream. So that intersection is the positive boundary between the aquifer and the stream. So these are all the cases of the this A is the positive boundary. It means the intersection between this perennial aquifer, this perennial aquifer is are the conditions of the positive boundary. So what are the conditions of the negative boundary? Just to look into this slide. On the other hand, when some impervious aquiclude formation does interact an aquifer, then it will stop the flow of the aquifer, and in that case that contact is known as negative boundary. So this is the case where we have aquiclude which acts as an impervious layer, and such type of boundary between both of them is known as the negative layer. So these two kinds of the layers are mainly formed between the aquifer and the natural source of a stream if it encounters during its movement. Now the next thing that we are going to see is the concept of the image well. At first I would like to state that this is purely a hypothetical concept, about the image well, that such type of well actually doesn't exist. So don't get just carried away by this type of concept. Is there any image well that really exists or not? This is purely an hypothetical concept of the image well. So this is the normal well that we just when we dig down the aquifer that we found, and this is the image well. So let's understand what is basically image well. So strictly speaking, the most geological boundary, except for some of the faulted structure, they do not occur at an abrupt straight line demarcation, yet they can assume to be without involving much error, since the data collected from them are relatively small. So it's saying that straight line demarcation, most of the geological boundaries that we see, let's consider this thing. So most of the geological boundaries that we see are not a straight line, okay, but the kind of the study that we do, that is very limited to a small part of the area. That's why we can use this assumption that it is a straight line. But if we will go and study on a very large scale, then we find that this kind of assumption doesn't hold, because that is only for a relatively small area. So if we consider the geological boundary as a straight line demarcation, if we assume that it has further been possible to solve that flow pattern, which helps in entry of the water in the wells by substituting a hypothetical stream that satisfy the limits of real system, and that hypothetical system is the concept of the image well, and that concept was initially given by Lord Kelvin in his electrostatic theory, in order to find the solution of the boundary problem. So the same thing we are going to do here also. We are going to find the imaginary solution, real solution. Just add both solution, and then we are going to get the solution of the imaginary well. Okay, so in this case we have seen this is the case of the this is the imaginary well, that is image well. So what's given here is that the real and bounded aquifer has been replaced by an imaginary aquifer that is purely imaginary, that doesn't exist, of an infinite areal extent if we have, but it is again not possible to have an infinite areal extent due to the presence of the faults, and an imaginary recharging well that is called image well. So that is purely a hypothetical concept about the image well that is placed in opposite side of the equidistance from the boundary. So this is the real well, and that is distance is a, and at the same equidistance this image well is being placed over there, that is purely hypothetical and imaginary well, and that imaginary recharge, whatever the imaginary recharge, that will return water to the aquifer at the same rate as it is drawn in the real. So it says that whatever the rate by which the water is being pumped, just recharge in this, the same rate will be in that imaginary well also, and that imaginary well consequently that produces a buildup of water level at the boundary that is exactly equal to the and cancel the drawdown of the real well. So whatever the drawdown, so there is basically no drawdown over here. So this drawdown and this drawdown, they both cancel out each other, and there is possibly no drawdown in the case of the imaginary well. So this is one thing that is not found in the real well. In the real well there will be always a drawdown, but in this case there will be no drawdown. Okay, so just a second. So that real component of the cone of depression, the real component, there are two components, one real, one will be imaginary. So the real component of the cone of depression of the real whale, I'm talking about this whale, its real component, it will for this cone of depression and the cone of impression of the image whale, all these are shown by the solid lines in the region of the real values. So in order to obtain the resultant, if we want to have a resultant of cone of depression, that is if we want to evaluate the drawdown at any point in the real region, so this is the real region and this is the imaginary region. It is written here real and this is imaginary. So if we want to evaluate at any point, these are the points. So if we want to evaluate at any points, we need to have the real components, that it is saying that if we want to have, we must have at any real, then we must have the components. In order to do so, we must add algebraically the real components of the two depression cones. इन दो depression cones के जो real components है, we must going to add them in order to get the value. Hence the resulted cone of depression, which will be formed by the combination of both these will, that will be steeped on the inside of the wheel and that will be flattened on the landward side. On this landward side it will be flattened. Okay, so this is the basic concept of this image well, that is purely in hypothetical concept, and such type of well also doesn't exist in real life. So that was a major idea about the Lord Kelvin, and that idea was just placed in the concept of the Fed halodics in order to obtain this image well. Okay, thanks for watching the video. In the next lecture we will cover the different topics. Thank you.